giving you a voice.
Making it loud our own way.
Welcome to the fun.
So yeah, as Shashir was saying, let's move on to talk about preparing for competition. So more so about judging, qualifiers, approach to league meets. So who wants to get us started?
I mean, so the first few qualifiers, it's a completely different game. And because to win, I mean, it depends on if you need to win them or not, because for ours, everyone gets into states. So that's a huge time benefit. But if it weren't that way, I mean, our first scrimmage is not this weekend, but next weekend, and we don't even have a single part put together yet. So, I mean, what a lot of teams do is they create separate robots for different competitions, depending on if you need to do well in those. And then it's oftentimes, if you have a good, very simple design, that maybe you get through your first qualifier or what have you. I mean, that's at least what I've heard, because we've never really had that experience.
Yeah, so personally, I've done both. But my team, Revamped, has only done leagues so far. But in my previous years, I have gone to qualifying tournaments. And I would say that there are advantages to both, right? If you want to win, not just your state, but like if you want to win at like any level of competition, like past your qualifiers, I feel very strongly that leagues is the way to go. I say this with a lot of empirical evidence. In Oregon, just last year, 8 of the 9 teams that made Worlds were league teams. The teams that won Worlds from Oregon, both this year and in 2014, those teams were the teams that did leagues. And the reason is because you just have a lot more dynamic, dynamic design iteration, and you just have a lot more experience with the game, right? You get 15 extra matches, and I think that that's something that's so underrated, but that's something that's actually absolutely crucial if you want to do well in higher levels. But at the same time, it is a lot of time commitment. Like, there's no doubt about that. You have to be willing to put in that time, and if that's just something that's impossible, qualifiers are the way to go. Like, if you aren't willing to put the amount of effort necessary for leagues but still choose to do leagues, I feel like you're going to be at a disadvantage compared to if you take a deep introspective look and realize that you can't put in this time, so you go for your qualifier instead. Because if you go for that qualifier, you'll have time to have a finished product. You'll be able to be a lot more refined, which can be successful. Because, for example, I believe Team 8045, Grommets, they did a qualifier in 2017 when they were really, really good. It's not saying that qualifiers will lead to a bad robot. It's just saying that it's a lot more likely that you'll have a good robot if you go to leagues.
Yep. So I'm going to jump in and interrupt this conversation for a second. So we have a giveaway. We are giving away 2 First Updates Now Fun supporter magnets. So this is what it looks like. So if you want one, you can type in
Meta.
Meta.
Meta. META will be the keyword. Yep, and we're doing two separate giveaways, so don't forget to make sure you click follow if you want to be entered, and type Meta in chat right now. If you do choose to subscribe, you'll get a 5x chance to win. If you do win, just make sure you shoot First Updates Now either on Discord or Twitch, your mailing information, first name, last name, mailing information, so we can mail that out to you. So we'll draw for that in a few minutes, everybody.
Yep.
Quick, I kind of want to circle back. So, Grace, you're from Minnesota, and if I remember right, you guys can choose between leagues and qualifiers. Is that right?
Yeah, we can.
What is your experience?
This was last year that this came into play, and our team chose to do leagues last year. And as a trial run, I loved leagues personally because it gave us the opportunity to weed out the bad designs and test things to the max rather than just kind of waiting until a qualifier to see whether the design works in actual competition. But like Shashir said, it takes a lot of time out of your build season, and we honestly chose to go back to qualifiers because we're all seniors this year and we just don't have the time to put in, and we don't feel like we would have done as well in leagues this year.
Yeah, for sure. One of the big advantages that qualifiers have is you can go to 2.
Yes.
So you're forced into 1 league championship.
Mm-hmm.
If you're sure you're going to advance, go for leagues, I guess. It really depends on what your focused on as a team. I think if you're less competitive, if you're doing it for fun, do leagues because you have more matches. I think if you're focused on league or on winning, you for sure you need the chances to advance. I would honestly stick to qualifiers because it gives you more chance to prepare if you know you can push yourself. So in a league system, you're forced to be better than the other teams because you see those teams more. If you're comfortable in your team's ability to push themselves to be really great, I think you can get by with doing qualifiers because it gives you a little more time to prepare.
Yeah, and NF Hames in chat said that in some regions you can even do 3 qualifiers. And as Turbocharged pointed out in chat, in Illinois we can only do leagues. We have no option. And Illinois is a closed state, so that typically means that other states won't let Illinois teams compete there. I like leagues, though. I've only done leagues, though. I have volunteered at a qualifier, but I have no idea what the experience for people competing there are. I think leagues are the best because we just plan our season around them. And at every single league meet, we're always constantly iterating. So typically we have a minimally competitive design at the first meet, enough that will win us enough where we're sure that we'll win every single match. And then afterwards, for the second meet or the third meet, we usually iterate. So by the second, we've kind of got autonomous down. Then the third, we kind of just go all out. And that same all out bot will be our league champ spot. So I like leagues a lot. There's a lot we can do with them.
Yeah, I gotta say, when I did qualifiers, that was the least stressful FTC season I've had, like, in my 5 years of doing this. So, like, if you have things to do, right? Like Grace, you were saying you're a senior. If you have college apps to do, like, yeah, go for quals. Like there's no, like, it's better for you, like, as a person and not just as an FTC student to do quals. So, like, don't think that, like, you just shouldn't do quals because your robots will be worse, because you gotta have some kind of balance.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So we have one last question for Peter from Turbocharged 14615. Do you think this year's game is harder than last year's? I guess, yeah, everyone can take that.
So personally, it depends. And the reason is because the core game last year, no, I think it's a lot harder this year to be able to do such a complex motion and sort. However, last year there was the whole autonomous craze of can you do more? And that was just crazy hard. So it depends what you look in comparison to. So for the everyday team that you're just trying to get as many points as you can in teleop, this year is a lot harder. But if you're the veteran team, I feel like, and you're coming off of the auto dominant last year, then I think this year might be a little bit easier. So it depends who you are. It's mixed for me.
Yeah, I thought last year had a really great low bar of entry, but also allowed for a lot of competitiveness at the upper levels. I mean, Peter, your team led the basically arms race, so to say, in terms of how many glyphs can you get in autonomous. It seemed like every few weeks there was, and they got 3, they got 4, and you guys got 6, right? That was East Super Regionals. So yeah, I think this game is a lot harder. Grace, Shishir, Ethan.
So I got to say that I mentioned this in the beginning, but I feel like this game is quite a bit easier. Relic Recovery was an easy game. Like, it wasn't very technically challenging. I feel like that was a very basic thing. Like, there was no significant barrier of entry, to use the terms that you said, Nathan. But at the same time, like, I felt like there was a level of unknown, right? With dealing with the different size game element that we had never touched before, right? Personally, for me, being a veteran, I feel like this is easier because I have simply more familiarity with the game elements. However, for teams that are rookies this year or rookies last year, I think it'll be a little harder because there is a barrier of entry when it comes to the creator or when it comes to having that hang. Grace, do you have anything else to add?
I agree with you. There's a lot for this season. There are a lot more resources out there for teams to go and look back on and find designs that they like, whereas last year we hadn't seen that game element before, so there weren't as many parallels that you could just go on YouTube and find a video of someone dealing with the exact same game element. So I think it's going to be easier in that sense, but I think it'll be harder since there's just so many more pieces on the field.
Yeah. So we have, or Ethan, do you have something to say?
I think definitely the auto is easier this year. Past that, I think it's harder in general. If you're a really, really strong autonomous team, this year could be harder. I don't know. It seems harder in general.
Yeah, and that actually brings us into our next question from Inder Suchadet. Sorry, I probably should know how to pronounce this. But which was, do you see teams scoring in auto like in Block Party or Relic Recovery? And personally, for me, I do not. Just like Nathan's shaking his head vigorously right now, like no way, simply because there's such less space, and any kind of interaction in auto is like a penalty, right? Like you can't interact with with your opposing alliance in auto. So I don't think it's worth it, and I don't think it'll happen.
There's no time to. That's the thing. There's a lot of moving parts. It's not like last year where, as Peter was saying, where there's just an open pit and one little goal. This game is very tight in terms of navigating an auto. So Robots SNR, I don't know, asks reach in or climb in. I assume that means to the crater. We kind of answered this earlier, but any final thoughts about that? I think we kind of just said, if you have the ability to reach in, do that, but climbing in's not bad. Is that a good summary?
Yeah. I think that really hits it on the head. You can't dismiss one or the other, but I think that there's going to be a more dominant strategy. All right.
I think there was one last question one last statement from Ishano45. They said in 3 days we were able to do everything in auto and we had 10 seconds left.
Well, that's pretty interesting, because I always thought that because there's so much room on the field, like to move, like you have to move so far, it's going to be quite hard to do that. But if teams in 3 days are already able to do something like that, I think there is room for growth. I take my previous statement back.
I could see a team running a double sample auto, and then their other team running cycles, like running 2 or 3 cycles in autonomous. I think it's possible. The question is, is it worth it? Because you're probably going to be 10 hours at least programming that, and it doesn't net you any extra points versus if you were just going to score those and tally out.
Yeah.
We disagree not to, please.
Maybe we'll see some auto battles this year. It'll be interesting.
Thank you to all of our co-executive producers, keeping fun loud, live, and independent. Pledge your support. Go to patreon.com/funfrc.